Hey guys, this is MK's NEET Coaching Center. We conduct online live interactive classes for the NEET aspirants. So today we are going to continue with the digestion and the absorption part 2. So first we are going to start with the digestion of the food. So the digestion of the food was going to start from the buccal cavity. So the buccal cavity performs two major functions. So one is the mastication of the food, that is chewing of the food, then facilitation of the swallowing. Swallowing is nothing but the pushing of the food into the esophagus. So the teeth and the tongue, with the help of the saliva, masticate and mix up with the food thoroughly. And the mucus in the saliva helps in lubrication and adhering of the masticated food. And the food particles will be converted into a structure called as the bolus. So this bolus will be pushed into the pharynx. From the pharynx, it will be pushed into the esophagus by the process called as the swallowing, or it is also called as the deglutition. So the bolus further passes through the esophagus by the successive way of the muscular contraction. So that process is called as the peristalsis. So this is the normal esophagus. So the esophagus will start contracting like this for the pushing the bolus into the stomach. So we can consider this as the bolus. So bolus will be like this. So it will be passing through the successive contraction, and then here you are going to have the gastroesophageal sphincter. So this sphincter will release. Therefore, the food will be conveyed into the stomach. So the saliva which is secreted by the three pairs of salivary glands will contain the electrolytes like sodium, potassium, chloride, and the bicarbonate, and the enzymes like the salivary amylases and the lysozyme. So salivary amylases, it is also called as the talent. So uh, the digestion of the carbohydrate, so which is also called as the sugar, will start in the buccal cavity itself. So about 30 percentage of the starch, so starch is an example for the polysaccharide, which is a carbohydrate. So minimum 30 percentage of the starch will be converted to the maltase in presence of the salivary amylase at a pH of 6.8. So the major function of the lysozymes, see, this is lysozymes, this is not lysosomes. So lysozymes is present in the saliva, and it has the antibacterial agent. So it is an antibacterial agent to prevent the infection. So the next, after the food from the buccal cavity, it will be conveyed to the esophagus. So esophagus doesn't have any function in the digestion, so just it will convert the food from the buccal cavity into the gastric, into the gastrum, that is the stomach. So inside in the stomach, the mucus of the stomach has the gastric gland, which was going to secrete the gastric juice. So the gastric gland contains mainly the three cells. So one is the first one is called as the mucous neck cell, which was going to secrete the mucus, which help in the lubrication. So the next cell is called as the peptic cell, or it is also called as the chief cell, or it is also called the zymogen cell, which will secrete the proenzyme. So proenzyme is nothing but the inactive form of an enzyme, that is the pepsinogen, and it was also going to secrete the inactive enzyme called as the prorenin. The last cell of the gastric gland is called as the parietal cell, or it is also called as the oxyntic cell, which secretes acid called as the hydrochloric acid, and it also secretes something called as the intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor is helpful in the absorption of the vitamin B12, and this vitamin B12 is very important in the process called as the erythropoiesis. So what is the erythropoiesis? Erythropoiesis is the formation of the RBC in the bone marrow. So in case of the absence of this absence or the deficiency of this intrinsic factor, there will be no absorption of the vitamin B12. So because of which there will be impairment in the erythropoiesis process, so which will lead to the anemia. So what anemia it is? It is mostly the megalocytic anemia. Next, coming to the enzymes of the stomach. So the enzymes of the stomach, we can use the mnemonic as the PRIL. So PRIL. L. So P stands for the pepsinogen, R stands for the renin, I stands for the intrinsic factor, L stands for the lipase. So what is the mnemonic for the gastric juice enzyme? It is April, PRIL. So P stands for the pepsinogen, R stands for renin. See, remember the spelling for the renin, it is RENNIN, because there is also called as renin, which is present in the kidney as well. So therefore, to avoid the confusion, so remember double N, which is the enzyme present in the gastric juice. Okay, then the food will be stored for about 4 to 5 hours in the stomach, and the food will thoroughly mix with the gastric juices, and by the hardening movement of the muscular wall, the bolus will be converted to the chyme. So the bolus has been formed in case of the buccal cavity. The chyme has been formed in the stomach. So the pepsinogen is the proenzyme. As I've already told, it is an inactive form. For converting it to the active form, we require HCl, the hydrochloric acid, which is secreted by the parietal cell or the oxyntic cell. So then the pepsinogen will be converted to the pepsin. So here in the stomach, mainly the protein digestion occurs. So the proteins in presence of the pepsin at the acidic pH of 1.8, it will be converted to the proteases and the peptones. And renin, it is a very important enzyme, so which is a proteolytic enzyme. So what do you mean by lytic? Lytic is nothing but lysis. Proteolytic is nothing but the proteolysis enzyme. So that is a breakdown of the protein, okay, which is found in the infant of 1 to 4 years a baby, which will be helpful in the digestion of the milk. This is a previous year NEET question, which is an important point to be noted. Then the lipases will be helped in the for the breakdown of the fats or the lipids. So next, coming to the digestion in the small intestine. So the chyme from the stomach will be pushed into the small intestine. In the small intestine, we will be getting the pancreatic juices, the bile juices, then the intestinal juices, all will be conveyed to the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. So what are the enzymes that is present in the pancreatic juices? So the mnemonic here to be remembered is TCALPN. So T stands for the trypsinogen, C stands for the chymotrypsinogen, A stands for the amylase, L stands for the lipase. Lipase is also called the strepsin. P stands for the procarboxypeptidase. N stands for the nucleus. So remember, this is nuclease. N stands for the nucleus. And remember another thing, that is a P is procarboxypeptidase. Okay, then the trypsinogen, once again, it is so remember, most of the time the no gen wherever it is present, for example the pepsinogen, the trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, that means they are in the inactive form. They has to be converted to the active form to do their function. So the trypsinogen will be converted to the trypsin in presence of an enzyme called as the enterokinase, which is an intestinal juice, and this trypsinogen will help in the conversion of the other inactive forms of the enzyme to the active form. For example, the chymotrypsinogen in presence of the trypsinogen will be converted to the chymotrypsin. Then the procarboxypeptidase will be converted to the carboxypeptidase in presence of the enzyme, that is the trypsin, which is the active form. Okay, then from the stomach already the protein digestion has been started. The proteins has been converted to the peptones and the proteases. Now in the small intestine, these trypsin, chymotrypsin and the carboxypeptidase will be converting these protein, peptones and the proteases to the dipeptide. See, this is so we know protein is the building block of the amino acid. So the proteins will be arranged like this. Okay, let's come later. Okay, so next the carbohydrate digestion. So the polysaccharide, that is the starch, its digestion has been started in the buccal cavity. Now in presence of the amylase, it was going to get converted to the disaccharide. Next, the nucleases will be converting the nucleic acid into the nucleotide, then into the nucleoside. Then the fat will be broken down by the lipases with the help of the bile into the di and the monoglycerate. So the fat in presence of the lipase, it will be converted to the diglyceride and monoglyceride. So the fat digestion mainly occurs in the small intestine. Next, coming to the bile juice, which is secreted by the liver. So it does not contain any enzyme. That is the very first point that you have to know. So the bile juice doesn't have any enzymes. So but it has the bile pigments like the bilirubin and the biliverdin and the bile salts and the cholesterol. So the bile helps in the emulsification of the fat and the breakdown of the fat. So this pigment will be deposited into the eye and the mucous gland in case of when the liver get affected, for example the jaundice. So this will lead to the yellowish discoloration of the skin and the mucous membrane of the skin. So that condition is called as the jaundice. Next is the intestinal juice, or it is also called the succus entericus. So the intestinal mucosal epithelium has the goblet cell which was going to secrete the mucus. What is the main function of the mucus? It was going to do the lubrication function, that is smoothing the function of the GIT. So the secretion of the brush border cell along with this goblet cell, these together, it is called as the intestinal juice. So the brush border cells of the mucosa, their secretion, and along with the secretion of the goblet cell, they secrete a juice called as the intestinal juice. So the juice contain the varieties of the enzymes. So what is the mnemonic that you are going to remember for the enzymes present in the intestinal juice? It is a DDNL. So first D stands for the disaccharidase. So example for inside the disaccharidase, you have to remember maltase, and then dipeptidase. The next one is the nucleosidase. So N in case of the intestinal juice stands for the nucleosidase, and then L stands for the lipase. Okay, so there is the submucosal gland of the duodenum. It is also called as the Brunner's gland. Okay, it was going to secrete the mucus and the bicarbonate into this intestinal juice. And then, so what is the function of this enzyme? So the dipeptide, so which will be converted to the amino acid in presence of the enzyme dipeptidase. Then the maltase will be converted to the glucose plus glucose in presence of the maltase. Lactose will be converted to the glucose plus galactose in presence of the lactase enzyme. Then sucrose will be converted to the glucose plus fructose in presence of the enzyme called as the sucrase. Okay, so what is a mnemonic? How you are going to remember? This is very confusing part. So they might ask you the questions like so the maltase was going to get converted to what and what. So sometime it will be confusing. So you can use this particular mnemonic, that is M stands for the maltase, which was going to get converted to G plus G, that is glucose plus glucose. So L stands for the lactose, so which was going to get converted to the G plus G again. But in case of the lactose, one is the glucose, another one is the galactose. Next one, S stands for the sucrose, so which will be converted to the G plus F, that is glucose plus fructose. So the next one is the nucleotide. The nucleotide has been already digested in the small intestine part of the duodenum. The nucleotide, now it will be converted to the nucleoside once again, and then it will be converted to the bases and the sugar. So the breakdown of the biomacromolecules, so all the digestion of the most of the nutrient will be taking place in the small intestine itself. Now the small intestine digestion has been done. Now the undigested or unabsorbed food will be conveyed to the large intestine, but there is no significant digestion which was going to take place into the large intestine. But there are few important function which is done by the large intestine. So for example, the absorption of some amount of the water, mineral, and certain drugs. So this is one of the main function of the large intestine. And then the secretion of the mucus into the secretion of the mucus, which help in the adhering of the waste, the undigested particle together, which will be helping in the easy passage of the waste material. And the waste undigested food is called as the feces. So already I told you about the ileocecal valve, which was going to be present between the small intestine part, the last part of the small intestine, that is the ileum, and which was going to join the large intestine part, that is the cecum. So there is a valve between them, that is called the ileocecal valve. So which will prevent the entry of which will prevent the backflow of the fecal matter. Fecal matter is nothing but the waste matter. Okay, so the digestion, the regulation of there is a the regulation of the digestion. So the regulation of the digestion is mainly by the neural and the hormonal control. For example, the hormonal control, you have to remember about the cholecystokinin and the secretin. So these are mainly involved in cholecystokinin and secretin, which was going to help in the digestion. So these are the hormone which is secreted by the mucosal glands of the GIT. And the hormonal the neural control will come from the brain, which will help in the relaxation of the sphincters, and thereby helps in the digestion.